We're beginning a new sermon series this week entitled Real Superheroes. Anybody like superheroes? Anybody? Anybody like superheroes when you were a kid, but you're afraid to admit it now? Right? Because someone was like now it's not bad, right? Because I saw a post on Facebook, and in the next 6 years, it had all the superhero movies that are supposed to be coming out in the next year's year. It was like 20 of them in the next 6 years are scheduled to be made everywhere. Like Wonder Woman's going to be made, and all this. Supergirl's getting ready to come on TV, and we have all this stuff going on. And so now it's really cool to be a superhero fan, right? But maybe like 10, 15 years ago, you're like, I don't know. Like maybe it wasn't so cool, but right now it's really cool. So you can admit it. Right now, admit it, and then if it gets uncool again, then you can, go back and not tell people again. But right now, take advantage of it. We're going to be looking at real superheroes. Certainly, we like the superheroes we see on TV and the movies, and we look at in the comic books, but there are real superheroes, and that's what we're really going to be looking at this week. And we're going to be looking at the faithful follower, and obviously you just saw in that clip that we're going to be talking about Peter. Peter, his superhero name, Peter was his alter ego, but his superhero name, had he had one, he would have been the faithful follower, right? And that's kind of how I imagine Peter. He walks around normally as Peter, but then every once in a while his superhero persona comes out, and that's what we're going to be looking at, is one of the times when his superhero persona comes out. And so the first thing we're going to look at is living our alter egos. Everybody know what an alter ego is? Right. And so a lot of superheroes in comics and movies, they have alter egos. Like they're the superhero, but then they have this ordinary life they live as their alter ego. So we're going to do a little test today. We're going to just see how geeky you are. So we're going to look at some alter egos, and I just want you to shout it out. You don't have to raise your hand. Just shout out. If you know who the superhero is, just go ahead and shout out who it is, okay? Batman. Good. Batman. All right, here's the next one. Spider-Man. Good. Here you go. Everyone got that one. All right, here we go. Now we're gonna step it up just one little notch of difficulty, okay? But I think most of you will still get this one. Wonder Woman. Good. Okay. Whew. That was just a warm-up, people. Now we're going to find out who the real superhero fans in the room are. Because now I have two that I think are pretty difficult. So we're going to see how well y'all do. Green Hornet. Britt Reed. Good. Somebody got it. And see, this is a hard one. You have to think back to the 1950s. Did you say Blue Beetle? Who said Blue Beetle? Jacob. Good job, Jacob. All right, the Blue Beetle. Ooh, I told you I had some hard ones in there. Right? I couldn't give you all like the really easy ones, right? So those are alter egos. They're people that they're just living their ordinary lives, and then they go out at night or when there's bad stuff happening, and they become superheroes. This is what it says in Luke 22:34. Jesus answered, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny 3 times that you know me. Peter as a superhero. This is the Peter who denied Jesus 3 times. How can he be a superhero? This is the Peter who Jesus said in a conversation with him, "Get ye behind me, Satan." A superhero? You know, in comics and movies, one of the things that makes superheroes appealing to us when we read about them and we watch them is that they have fallibility. Superman would not be nearly as enjoyable if there wasn't kryptonite. Spider-Man would not be nearly as enjoyable if he wasn't dealing with that conflict between how do you live your life doing good and not going overboard and having a love life and all this stuff and a boss that's out to get you, all this fallible stuff in his life. That's what makes them appealing. That's what makes them to where we can watch them. And yet still we see these people, they go out and they live these lives and they make these mistakes, and yet they're still superheroes. And that's what we have to understand about our lives. Our failings in life do not exclude us from having superhero faith. Our doubts in life do not exclude us from having superhero faith. Because that's part of our alter ego. That's part of just who we are. We have doubts. We have failings. We sin. Paul considered himself the greatest among sinners. Not that he was better than all the other sinners, but that he sinned more than anybody else. In his mind, he looked at it and he goes, of all the sinners out there, I'm probably the biggest. Right? Because he knew his sins. He didn't know everybody else's. He could see his sins, and to him it felt like, man, I'm the biggest sinner. And yet we see Paul as a hero, really doing superheroic things, right? A man of great faith who through that faith did some great things and had great encounters with God. Despite his alter ego, despite the fact that he was fallible, that he had doubts, that he has failings. And we have to understand that we have those two. That doesn't limit us from still grabbing hold of our faith and elevating it to such standards that we can do superheroic things. And then we need to listen to encouragement. Let me set this up for you. Jesus told the disciples, he said, get in that boat, and I want you to go ahead and cross the lake. I'm going to stay here and pray for a little while. I'll meet you on the other side. So the disciples, being faithful people, they got in the boat, and they began to row to the other side, and a storm came up, and it was blowing against them. They were blown off course. I mean, the waves are crashing against the boat. It's rocking back and forth, and they're struggling. They should have been there already, and they're not even halfway there because of this storm. And all of a sudden, they look up, and they go, oh, it's a ghost! Because Jesus took a shortcut. He just started walking on the water in the middle of the storm. He's just walking from point A to point B. He's like, I don't need a boat. I'm not going around. I'm just going straight across. They see something walking on the water. Oh, it's a ghost. And right away, Jesus called out to them, be brave, it is I, don't be afraid. Be brave, it is I, don't be afraid. Anyone ever heard any discouragement in their life? Anyone ever had somebody tell you that you couldn't do it? Discouragement is something we deal with way too regularly, right? And sometimes we hear it from places that it's heartbreaking. Sometimes maybe we hear discouragement from our parents. Sometimes we hear discouragement from our teachers. By the way, if you're a teacher, that's not your job to discourage kids. Your job is to encourage them. I heard a teacher say on YouTube, I was watching this little thing, and she said, as a teacher, you're going to have kids you don't like, and your job is to not let them know that. And I thought, that sounds like a pastor to me. Oh, no, I'm not talking about you, though. I mean, obviously. But I mean, some pastors might have people in their church they don't like. And you know what their job is? To not let them know that they're the ones they don't like. Because if you do, then you're failing. Your job as a teacher, as a pastor, as a parent, as a friend, as a neighbor. We don't have to like everybody, but we have to be kind to everybody. And we have to learn to listen to the encouragement Because there's a lot of people out there saying you can't do it, including sometimes yourself. But there are also voices that are voices of encouragement. Hopefully that's your parents. And I almost assure you there are teachers that you have, if you're in school. Even though there might be one or two teachers that are not, there are other teachers that are rooting for you, verbally telling you you can do it. Maybe it's grandparents, maybe it's an aunt, an uncle, a neighbor, a friend, someone sitting next to you in church. But it's easy for us to not listen to that. It's easy for us to listen to the, it's a ghost, we're all going to die, the storm's too big, we're all going to drown. It's easier sometimes for us to listen to that than be brave, it is I, don't be afraid. But if we want to elevate our faith to a superheroic level, we need to listen to the encouragement. We're going to hear the other, but we don't always get to decide what we hear, because that's a physical thing. You can just hear something, you don't get to decide. You do get to decide what you listen to, what you internalize, what you believe. That is the decision you get to make. Nobody gets to make that for you. You get to decide what you listen to. So stop listening to the discouragement and decide to listen to the encouragement. Listen to those voices that say, you can do it. Listen to the voices that say, you know what, you can get into college. I know you're making straight D's right now, but you can change things. You can get into college. There's ways to do it. You can go to junior college. You can get some books and do some studying on your own so that you can at least get a grade on your ACT that'll let you get into some of these colleges. You can do it. Those are the voices to listen to. Those are the voices that begin to build up our faith. And then sometimes we just need to take immediate action. Peter hollered out after Jesus said that. He said, if that is really you, Lord, tell me to come out to you. I mean, there's his first act of faith right now, right? And Jesus replies with one word, come. So Peter got out of the boat and walked on water toward Jesus. There's a sense in this entire story, this sense of urgency. In fact, it uses the word immediately 3 times. All of them referring to Jesus. Jesus immediately did this. Jesus immediately sent them on the boat. Jesus immediately said, be brave, it is I. Jesus immediately is going to get ready to do something else. Immediacy. There is this sense of urgency. And what I notice in this passage is what it does not say. It does not say that Jesus said come, and Peter said, okay, I need to pray about this. With my family. Jesus, I'll get back to you. Okay? That's not what he did. You know what he did? Jesus said come, and he got out of the boat with a sense of urgency. You know why I believe he was able to do that? Because I believe the prayers had preceded this. You know what it says to me? Maybe I'm crazy. In fact, I'm a preacher, so it's almost assured I am. Here's what it says to me. If someone is asked to do something and they say, let me pray about it, in my mind, I don't say this to you because I'm usually nicer than that. If I do say it to you, I'm having a bad day. But in my mind, I'm thinking, why haven't you been praying already? Where were your prayers leading up to this? Because here's what I think our prayers ought to be. God, open up some doors for me to experience you. God, open up the ways in my life that I might serve you. God, reveal to me the things in my life I need to be doing. If we are constantly praying these prayers in advance, then what happens is Jesus says, come, and we don't have to wait and see. We don't have to do what the other 11 disciples did, and him and Han go, ooh, was he talking? We just get out of the boat immediately. Because here's the thing. How many opportunities do we miss to encounter Christ because we were not prepared to act immediately? How many times do we see somebody hurting somewhere in our life and we have to take a step back and think, well, what should I do? God, what do you want me to do about this person? And by the time we're done praying, that person is gone. They've driven off. They've walked off. And we missed the opportunity to experience the God through the caring for others. Because we just weren't ready. Sometimes we just need to take immediate action. Sometimes we need to use others' faith. So he gets out of the boat and he starts walking on the water. Jesus is walking on the water, and now Peter is walking on the water. But now remember, there's a storm that is crashing waves. And the Scriptures tell us that all of a sudden he heard all this. And he began to sink. Right away, Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. Your faith is so small, he said. Why did you doubt me? I always wonder about this passage, right? I mean, here's Peter, who got out of the boat when Jesus said come, and he's walking on the water, and the next thing Jesus says to him is, your faith is so small. And I think what he was saying to Peter was this. Peter, there's so much more than walking on water. There's so much more. I mean, Peter, this is nothing. Walking on water? There's so much more that your faith can do. My guess is none of us will probably ever get the chance to have Jesus walk on the water in front of us and say, come, and we walk on water. Probably not. Just guessing. But I think there is more. I think that we can have greater than walking on water. And I think that's what Jesus is saying to Peter here. Your faith is so small. Peter, this is nothing. And then he says this, why did you doubt me? And I think the answer to that is because all of a sudden he felt all alone. The other 11 disciples were in the boat. There's Jesus out there, but he got distracted from Jesus by all the waves pounding against him and the noise and all of that. And all of a sudden, he was alone. And he began to sink. And Jesus reached out his hand and grabbed him. And he wasn't sinking anymore, not because his faith was so great, but because he was able to lean on the faith of Jesus. See, sometimes our faith is going to stumble. Sometimes there are going to be things happen in our lives, tragedies that befall us, things that go around, just moments in our life where we doubt. And we're going to be that person who has such little faith. And it is those moments that we need to rely on the faith of others. We need to borrow their faith. We need to walk hand in hand with each other, so that their faith can be our faith, so that we don't sink all the way under. That's why Paul told the church, don't give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing. That's why this body is so important. Because it allows us to rely on and borrow the faith of those people around us. And the worst time not to come to church is when something bad is happening in your life. But it seems to me that's the time when people stop coming to church. Don't fall for that trap. Because it is in those moments when you don't have faith, when you need church the most. Because when you come to church, there are going to be people around you who are high up on the hill, because we live lives like this, right? And I promise you, almost every time you come into church, if you're up here, there's going to be somebody down here. And if you're down here, there's going to be somebody up here. And you can either be the person who someone borrows your faith, or you can be the person who needs to borrow someone else's faith. But don't just sit at home. Because if you're at home by yourself, everybody's down here. Right? So we need to use others' faith. And the next thing is renew your faith. And when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. And those who were in the boat worshipped Him, saying, "Truly you are the Son of God." Truly you are the Son of God. That's what worship is. Worship is not singing songs. We sing songs to facilitate worship. Because in those songs, we proclaim basically this: truly you are the Son of God. We proclaim the goodness and greatness of God through song. The message that I give, that's not worship. It is a way in which we facilitate worship, because my job is to come up here and tell you truly Jesus is the Son of God. To proclaim and add value to God's name. All of these things are worship. Worship is not just something we do for an hour a week. Worship is a way in which we live our life, because every time you do something that proclaims the goodness and value and worth of God, that is a moment of worship. And we need to be worshiping. And yes, corporately is a great way to do it. Because when you can join with other people and join your voice in doing that, it adds, I think, even more power to it. It even adds even more renewal. But here's the interesting thing. Remember, Peter is the same guy. Peter's the same guy who Jesus said, "Satan, get ye behind me." Peter is the same guy that when they came to arrest Jesus, he cut off the Roman guard's ear, and Jesus had to say, "No, wait a second, put your sword up there, Peter." And he picked up the ear and he put it back on the guy's head and reattached it to his face. That's pretty cool right there, right? This is the same Peter. This is the same Peter who denied Jesus 3 times. And I started to look at the experience of Peter walking on the water and the experience of Peter denying Christ 3 times. And I thought, what's the difference? Why is it that at one moment he had such faith that he got out of the boat and began to walk towards Jesus, and at another moment his faith was so fragile that he denied Jesus 3 times? What happened right before they got into the boat to cross the lake? Worship. Jesus was holding church. It is this moment where he fed the thousands. Wow, what a worship experience that they had just had. What a renewing of faith through worship that led so that even in the midst of the storm, when Jesus said, "Come," because his faith had been renewed through worship, he was able to get out of the boat and go. But what happened just before the denial of Christ? Jesus went with his disciple up to the garden to pray. And he told his disciples, "Would you please attend with me?" And he went off by himself and he prayed, and he went back, and they were all asleep. Anyone miss worship because you're asleep ever? How many people at some point this week thought they were going to come to church here, somewhere else? Doesn't matter where. But for some reason, instead of going to church, they slept. Well, they're in pretty good company. That's what the disciples did. He said, "What are you guys doing? Can't you just stay awake and pray for a little while? Come on, guys." He goes off and he prays again. And he comes back a second time. They're asleep. When they could have been renewing their faith through worship, they were sleeping. And I don't think it's any coincidence that right after that, Peter denies Christ 3 times. That's the difference worship will make in your life. It just will. You know it. If you stop and think about it, you know the difference it makes when you're here regularly worshiping and when you're not. And the ebb and flow of your faith and how you interact with Jesus and how you interact with the people around you. You know, I've said this a lot, and I'll just say it again. Man, I'd love to see all these seats filled up. Not because I think it'll do something really good for my ego, although it might, but that's really not the reason. The reason is I know the power of worship and what it does for us. And I know what happens when a people are constantly, persistently worshiping, and the difference it makes in the way they encounter Jesus and the way they treat others. Because worship makes a difference in our lives. Peter was the faithful follower. He wasn't perfect. Not by a long shot, but that's good because neither are we. You know, sometimes you have a good friend and you can say things to them that you wouldn't say to other people. I feel like that's Peter and Jesus. Like, I don't know that Jesus would have said to just anybody, "Satan, get ye behind me." I don't know that Jesus would have said to just anybody when they had just got out and walked on the water, "Why do you have such little faith?" I just think that they had this like relationship. Like, I can say these things to you because you're my friend. I'm going to tell you the truth. But Jesus saw something in Peter that others couldn't. You know, Peter didn't start off as Peter in the Bible. Jesus gave him that name because it means rock. And Jesus said, "Your new name's Peter, because I'm going to build my church on you, the rock." The rock? I mean, it's easy to look at him and think, him? Yeah, Him. Because Jesus isn't looking for perfect people. Jesus is looking for imperfect people who will use His perfection to change the world. Jesus is looking for imperfect people who at the right time, because they have prepared themselves, can elevate their faith to do superheroic things, to change other people's lives, to change their own lives, and to change the world. See, that's what it means to be a superhero. Not to leap over tall buildings or shoot spider webs out of your hand. I mean, that's all fun to look at, but real superheroes are people who take the ordinary things they have and elevate them to such a level that they can do heroic things that they couldn't have done otherwise. And that's our opportunity. That's what God calls us. God calls us to be superheroes. Not every day, all the time, but in those moments of our lives when we're ready to be a faithful follower and change the world. Would you pray with me, please? God, each of us came here with our own imperfections, our own doubts and struggles, our own sin. And we just came here to be renewed in worship. That we can help overcome all these failings in our lives. That we can prepare ourselves through the prayers to you that ready us for immediate action. So God, help us to be ready to encounter you. Help us to be people who listen to the encouragement instead of the discouragement. Help us to be a people who will get out of the boat and walk on water and not let the small amount of our faith stop us, because just that small amount of faith can change the world, can change our lives, can change our families. So God, help us to be faithful followers of you. And as we go forth into the world, help us to be a shining light to others. Help us to be a people who will help others to live out their faith, to be people of encouragement, to be a people who will let others use our faith. God, use us to change the world. We pray all of this in your Son Jesus' name. Amen. I invite you back next week as we look at the courageous prophet.